East Herts District Council Development Management Committee, 6th of December 2023. Welcome members, welcome visitors, and welcome to everybody that is joining us online. Could we please start, Peter, with apologies and substitutes?
Yeah, there are two apologies from Councillor Burt, and Councillor Connolly is substituting, and then also from Councillor Aubrey Holt and Councillor Stanbull is substituting. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, there are no announcements. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest this evening? No declarations of interest. Item 4 is the minutes of the 20th of September meeting. Are there any points of accuracy or fact that members want to point out with those minutes? Could I mention one for minute number 147, which is the food store on Stansted Road? I referred to footpath E2 that had not been included in footway improvements in condition 19. Could I have a member to propose the minutes, please? Councillor Copley, and somebody to second. Councillor Devonshire, thank you. All those accepting the minutes as a true record? Those against, and abstentions, please. Thank you very much. So that means that the minutes of the last meeting are accepted and carried as a true record. Planning applications that we're considering tonight. Application number 3/23/0579 FUL. This is Pinewood School in Hoe Lane, Ware, and it's the demolition of the school and erection of a new replacement school with associated landscaping and parking. And the application includes temporary teaching accommodation during the period of construction. I want to put on the public record that yesterday, the 5th of December, Development Management Committee members were sent an email, or sent via an email, a councillor briefing note on Pinewood School planning for our future. And this was by Rebecca Darling of Stony Rock. Officers have reviewed the briefing note and have confirmed that the content merely relates to a summary of the proposals, which are covered in the presenting officer's report and the presentation that we will have tonight. There's no information contained in this note. For the purposes of transparency, I will ask for a show of hands in a moment from members who have read the briefing note, and I will then ask each member who has raised their hand to confirm that they have come to the committee this evening with an open mind to determine the application. So just for avoidance of doubt, there is no new information contained in the note that was circulated. So members, can I first of all just have a show of hands of those of you that have read this? And then if I could go around you one by one. Councillor Watson, have you come with an open mind on this application?
I have come with an open mind on this application.
I have come with an open mind.
Thank you.
Also, Chairman.
Thank you, councillor Bull.
Yes, I've come with an open mind.
Thank you, councillor Copley.
Yes, I've come with an open mind.
Thank you, councillor Donald. That's it. Okay.
Yes, I come with an open mind.
Thank you, councillor Stone. Thank you. So that's just for the avoidance of doubt and full transparency. So I'd like to hand over now to Neil Button for the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. This is an application, as Councillor Estop has alluded to, for demolition of the existing school and the erection of a replacement SEN school with associated landscaping, car parking, associated structures and various teaching facilities. The development also includes a temporary teaching accommodation, which also includes a hall, dining room and catering facilities, etc. So if we can move next slide, please. Thank you. The site's located on the southern side of Ware, and it's on the eastern side of Hoe Lane, the northern side of Walnut Tree Walk, and it comprises a special education needs and disabilities, an SEND school. The site is bordered to the east by the Middleton Primary School and to the north by the Presdales Academy, which is a secondary school which includes a sixth form college. Next slide, please. This is a red line image of the planning application site, which extends around the Middleton Primary School to the east. To the north, you have the playing fields. The site's located within the Metropolitan Greenbelt. The land to the east of the existing built form is an allocated open space covered by SCFLR1 in district plan. A public right-of-way, which is a bridle way, runs along Walnut Tree Walk to the south of this site. Next slide, please. Again, this shows you the outline of the existing Pinewood School, and to the right-hand side to the east is the Middleton School. The site falls within the Ware neighbourhood plan area. Next slide, please. Current school buildings are a mixture of single-storey and two-storey buildings in height that are in a current state of deterioration, and you will see within the following photographs. The buildings constitute themselves a functional utilitarian design which are now outdated and coming to the end of their life. Can you just move it for the next few photos? So these are some of the photographs that have been taken on the site, representing an up-to-date image of the site. If you can scroll the next slide, please. There are some temporary teaching facilities on site. A car parking area, hard standing occupies quite a large area of the site. There is some ad hoc landscaping within the site, some green areas, some grassed areas, seating areas, play areas, etc. So if you can move to the next slide. This is an image showing on the right-hand side is the existing tennis courts. On the left-hand side is an area of open space which is designated, and that's being lost to make way for the revised layout of the scheme. Next slide, please. These are the playing fields to the east of the site. The site includes a number of properties that are on the site. There's 4 houses that are in the site. This is house number 4. 3 of the 4 houses are in the school's ownership. 1 of them is in independent ownership. Next slide, please. The image on the right-hand side, you can get a clear picture of house number 3, which is in independent ownership. Next slide. And houses number 1 and 2. These are accessed by the main access entrance to the site. Next slide, please. These images show the land to the north, which is part of the Presdale School play area, and to the image on the right-hand side is the Middleton School view from the site itself. Next slide, please. Proposals comprise a full application for demolition of the existing Pinewood School with a replacement school. That includes a number of structures within the site and landscaping, hard landscaping, soft landscaping, and temporary facilities. Department of Education have confirmed that the current school buildings do not provide facilities that are needed for the pupils on the site. And due to an increase in the pupil numbers since its construction, and due to the increase in percentage of non-ambulant pupils, the school buildings are designed to provide a modern and updated facility to support an uplift in the non-ambulant SEND pupils to 25%. These provide additional space and facilities to support these pupils. The development provides an opportunity to enhance the SEND education offer for students within the catchment area, and it plans to deliver improved teaching facilities within a new teaching environment with up-to-date technology, SEND specific facilities. The school has been designed to be significantly more accessible within the site and easily accommodate a larger equipment supporting movements. The proposal provides improved areas of open space for future pupils of the school alongside a multi-use games area, a hydrotherapy pool, outdoor learning areas and playground space. This image shows you the existing layout in blue, which you can see thinly located, with the proposed layout in sort of main colours, which you can see in the slide. Next slide, please. This slide shows the main circulation and access routes in and around the proposed site. And so where you see the green line, those represent the pedestrian movements within the site. And so you see the green path from Hoe Lane, that represents the main pedestrian route into the building, with the green route showing to the rear from the car park. The cross hatched area, which you can see in purple, that runs along the sort of top of the site and turns around, is the vehicular drop-off for authorised vehicles, with the staff parking area to the southern side of the development site. The proposals, as I mentioned, do propose an improved drop-off facility within the site, which is again designed with the type of pupil in mind, so it creates a more orderly drop-off at times for the SEND students. Next slide, please. Important to note on this slide, you can see the outline of the existing building in red with the proposed building in colours. The proposed building has been designed specifically with much wider corridors and larger classrooms, additional storage areas, different facilities, dining halls, main halls, sports halls, and all of those has been designed specifically with the SEND needs in mind. And I think that plan is a good one to sort of just indicate the sort of difference. Next slide, please. This is the proposed first floor of the building. You can see the outline of the existing building in red. So as you can see, it's quite a large increase in the first floor of the site, along with a different footprint. Next slide, please. And this is the roof plan. Parts of the roof do project up to that sort of second floor level, and that's to accommodate plant and equipment. Next slide, please. Proposed elevations are shown in this slide, with the outline in red, very faintly illustrated in red, as the existing school buildings, and so the dotted red lines to indicate the change in scale of the development. The predominant materials are rain screen cladding, a variety of colours to soften the appearance. There is brickwork within the lower floors, larger glazed windows at classrooms in order to get more light into the classrooms and the various rooms. There's a biosolar roof with green roofs incorporated and photovoltaic panels. The proposal also includes some additional canopies outside of the ground floor classrooms, which provide external teaching space and external classrooms. The building will achieve a net zero carbon in operation at handover, and the architectural approach constitutes a fabric first principle, which ensures that the fabric, heating, ventilation, water and lighting systems are designed to meet the energy efficient standards, and so they're robustly proposed. Next slide, please. This slide represents a number of CGIs that were produced in support of the application that was submitted. And again, it's probably just important to direct the councillors to the change in the appearance of the current site and the proposal, which is bringing forward a much more modern building built to modern standards, and is a fairly typical sort of modern school design. It's based around the central courtyard, more orderly spaces and so on. Yeah, so the applicant has put forward a case that's, in their view, the school has been laid out to have a design that is considered considers the surrounding woodland, the sports fields and the neighbouring uses. The applicant also considers that it provides a different learning landscape with larger and additional classrooms, wider corridors, external classrooms and dual use activity zones. The applicant is the Department of Education, and so they will provide these schools based upon the Department of Education standards. And what we're here to consider today is the development against the planning standard. And so there are slightly different standards that are in play. What we're looking at today is the planning case. But I think it's also just important to make that these are put forward for specific DOE standards. A proposal includes a new central courtyard, an increase in biodiversity on the site of 17.7%, biodiversity net gains, the biased solar roof, green roof and PV panels that I mentioned. The proposals include the retention of habitat and woodland areas. They increase the usable external space with dedicated access for the community to use through the sports facilities, and that would be secured by a community use strategy, which will be conditioned. And proposal has been designed to meet a high standard of sustainable construction and design through the whole life of the development, and that includes the construction phases, the temporary school environment and post completion. Move on to the next slide, please. Just a few more CGIs showing how the illustration of the building might occur. Next slide, please. I've touched on it briefly, but there is a difference in the scale of the buildings that's on the site at the moment, and these images just give an indication of the difference. And so you can see on the left-hand side of the screen the outline of the proposed development in blue, with the existing building in colour. Then on the right-hand side, you see the proposed building in colours with the outline dotted in red. And so it's clear to see from these comparisons that the development is quite a lot larger in terms of the floor space, but also the volume of the building itself is increased on site. And so that presents some different considerations to that officers have been working through with the applicant. Next slide, please. This shows an indication of the building heights of the existing and the proposed. The top two images are the eastern elevations, and the top image is the existing elevation in sort of airbrushed with the blue dotted line being the proposed, and then the southern elevation is shown on the bottom two images, again with the blue line of the proposal, and the faint coloured scheme colours the existing building. Next slide, please. And these represent the western and the northern elevations, again with a similar comparison. Officers requested these drawings throughout the consideration of the planning application because we were seeking to assess the difference of scale on the site, and that was an important factor in how we presented the planning assessment. Next slide, please. And this is an illustration of the landscape scheme of the site, which retains a majority of the existing landscaping within the site, and so it is a very tree-lined and wooded area which the existing school sits within, and so that setting doesn't change to a significant degree. And there are a few trees that are removed. There's one category A tree, 2 category B trees, and a number of low quality trees which are being felled. However, there is no overall unacceptable adverse arboricultural impact. The trees and landscape officer raises no objection to the proposals. The next few slides show in grey colour with the purple colours on the right hand side the two temporary buildings that are proposed during the reconstruction of the proposed school building on the left hand side. These include a parking area and a dining area and a school hall on the left hand side, the smaller building, and then the right hand side is the classrooms, which is proposed within a 2-storey building. You move to the next slide. Thank you. Again, this just shows you the layout of the temporary classrooms. These are very much a functional design that are meant to support the lifetime of the temporary school when it's in situ. Next slide, please. Again, this is the temporary hall, the kitchen, and the dining hall. Next slide. So in terms of the principle of development, officers consider that it complies with the district plan policy CFLR 10, which represents proposals for new and improved educational facilities. And it also complies with the MPPF paragraph 95. And that paragraph requires a sufficient choice of school places that are available to meet the needs of new communities. With regard to the very special circumstances, the detailed office report that's before members concludes that the proposed development comprises a much larger but a significantly improved school building with associated provisions, and as such, we consider it inappropriate development within the green belt. However, officers also consider that there are a number of very special circumstances which have been demonstrated to our satisfaction. These are set out in the officer report in detail, and these very special circumstances indicate that the development is acceptable in planning terms and therefore compliant with the Greenbelt guidance that's set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, along with the Council's District Plan Policy GBR1. Just a summary of those very special circumstances, which I think we need to just touch on briefly. The first one is that there is a clear and established need for the development. And in this case, that is to meet the county-wide provision for SEND secondary school places. It must be provided in this location to address the needs in the wider area. The second circumstance is that the existing school is outdated and is unsuitable for refurbishment, and it requires a comprehensive redevelopment and reprovision. The third circumstance is that the proposed development provides an additional or some additional community benefit by virtue of the new sports facilities that will be accessible to the local community after school hours by virtue of the community use agreement, which is to be conditioned. And then the final very special circumstance is that there are no alternative sites that were considered suitable to accommodate the development. And so a combination of those very special circumstances in the officer's view represent very special circumstances, and that constitutes a very significant material consideration in terms of how this is balanced and how we've come to an assessment on the application. So notwithstanding the building being larger, there are very special circumstances that weigh heavily in favour of supporting the proposals. In design terms, officers consider that proposed building and associated structures are of an acceptable standard of design, and these constitute a significant improvement to the current buildings that are on the site. The resulting design and the architectural form of the development is considered to be acceptable, notwithstanding the additional built form on the site. These are typical of a modern school building and are compatible with the educational character of this site and the surrounding area, which includes other schools. Officers consider that proposal has a minimal impact, a minimal landscape impact on the setting, given the secluded nature of the site, which is set back behind wooded areas on Hoe Lane and Walnut Tree Walk. The Council's landscape and urban design officers raised no objections to the scheme. Therefore, the design proposal is acceptable and would not have a significant harmful impact on the character of the area, and the proposals would accord with the policy DS4 of the district plan and the design guidance within the MPPF. Turning to the transport considerations, there are 78 car parking spaces provided. These include 5 accessible bays, 8 active electrical vehicle charging bays, and provision for 15 future EV bays. They also provide provision for parking for the houses. There are also 3 school minibus bays. The proposed capacity of the school is to remain as per the existing 192 pupils, and the additional increase in traffic as a result of the community use of the school would be considered to be acceptable and within tolerances that are acceptable to the local highways authority, and therefore there would be no significant adverse highways impact. County's highways officers raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions, and these relate to provision of a travel plan, EV charger provisions, accessible bays, a policy compliant level of cycle parking. The proposed car parking on-site routes, the circulation and vehicle movements are also considered to be acceptable and safe in terms of highways considerations. And then turning to the sustainability, which is a key issue for officers, the applicant's been able to demonstrate that the principles of good sustainable design have been incorporated throughout the lifetime of the development, including at the construction phase, and these are set out in detail within the applicant's sustainability statement and the renewable energy reports that were submitted with the application. A number of measures have been included, and these include the use of sustainable materials from local sources, a reduction in water use, provision of green roofs, PV panels, safeguards and enhancements to on-site ecology, the landscaping and tree protection, cycle spaces, EV provisions, the orientation of classrooms to secure natural light, and incorporation of energy efficient internal and external lighting. Minimising construction waste, reduction of CO2 emissions through technologies, and incorporation of high insulation standards. In short, there are very efficient building services and technologies that have been proposed, and that the building has been designed to achieve net zero carbon in operation at the handover. And those measures will be secured by way of the conditions that are set out at the end of this report. In summary, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable with regards to design, the impact upon neighbouring amenity highways, landscaping, flooding, drainage, climate change, and water resources, ecology and biodiversity. With regard to the principle of development, the application does amount to inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. However, it is considered that very special circumstances exist to clearly outweigh this harm due to the need to provide improved educational facilities of children with special educational and disability needs. Overall, on the balance of considerations, the application that is therefore considered to comply with some of the relevant policies in the East Herts District Plan and the National Policy Framework, due to the demonstration of very special circumstances which justify the provision of development within the Greenbelt, there are material circumstances and considerations which indicate that the application can and should be determined favourably, notwithstanding the conflict with the development plan. As such, and on balance, officers recommend that the application is approved, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that very clear presentation. I'd like to call on Bob Robinson, who has come to speak on behalf of the applicant. Welcome.
Chair, members, my name is Bob Robinson, a Director of DPP Planning, and we are the agents for the application. As your officer's report identifies, this is a long-established SEN school which draws pupils from throughout southeastern Hertfordshire. It was originally designed to cater for around 110 students, but as the demand for SEN places has increased over the years, there are now close to 200 pupils at the school. Under both its former control as a Herts LEA school and more recently as an academy trust, some of the additional pressure has been absorbed by the provision of temporary classrooms, which have in effect become semi-permanent, and by repurposing what were originally specialist teaching spaces for more general purpose teaching. However, the buildings on the site are now largely life expired. There is also an increasing requirement to provide for a proportion of disabled students, and guidance is that an allowance should be made in terms of internal space for some 25% of pupils falling within the SEND cohort, which cannot be achieved with the current school buildings. I note that the officer's report does question part of the need case on the very special circumstances on the basis that there's no planned uplift in pupils. However, this does, in our view, rather miss the point that staff at the school have had to make do with a facility which was never designed to accommodate the number of pupils who are presently taught at the site. And as such, there's an underlying hidden need which qualitatively has also impacted on the education that can be offered. We appreciate that the school's location within the Greenbelt does create tensions around expansion, and the new design has sought to accommodate the additional space required by building upwards instead of outwards, so keeping the footprint of the building largely to the present built form. At the same time, the new school incorporates a number of sustainable technologies, as Neil explained, which means that the school aims to achieve net zero carbon in operation. It will be noted that there are no objections to the scheme on the part of either statutory consultees or local residents, and I would urge you to grant consent for the school this evening so that the educational enhancements that the school will bring to the SEN community in East Hertfordshire can be delivered forthwith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. So, members. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in this question. I've got two questions actually. The first question is, what's the anticipated lifespan of this building, the new building that is? I think that, as I understand it, a building of this type is normally sort of predicted to last about 60 years, perhaps less time. So that's a question I'd be interested in knowing the answer to. And sort of linked to that is the question about this school not providing additional spaces. I take the point that was made by the speaker, but given that it looks as though there will be a greater need for SEND spaces, and this is an excellent opportunity to provide extra spaces. It's a puzzle to me as to why that opportunity hasn't been taken, particularly given the sort of carbon cost of taking down the old building and building a new building.
Councillor Stowe.
It's just for clarification I wanted really. I noticed that the applicant talks about 118 square metres below the current footprint. However, the officers mentioned 434 metres square. Is that mainly due to the temporary buildings that have expired that you didn't take into account, but perhaps they did? Could you just answer that for me?
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. I mean, the temporary buildings aren't taken into account. So I think the key consideration isn't necessarily the numbers, the volume or the floor space increase. It's the elevation drawings that I presented showed you an indication of the additional height of the building and the larger footprint that we had, and the purpose of presenting those was to give an indication of whether the development was a proportional increase in the scale of development on the site, or whether it was a larger increase than of built form on site. Officers considered that it's a larger increase of built form on site, and that's why we concluded that the scheme could be defined as inappropriate development, and that's why we went down the route of looking at the very special circumstances in order to look at the scheme. So that probably doesn't answer your question entirely, but that's the position we took.
And Neil, could you answer, do you have an answer for the anticipated lifespan of these buildings?
No, I don't, and that's not something that we can factor into a planning application such. For a permanent building, we're consenting a permanent building on the basis that that's what it is, and so it's not often that we see development that has a lifespan put in with the application. So it may be that we have a temporary building that might be there for 5 years if it's for that purpose, but for a building like a school, it doesn't have a set life, or any utilitarian building. It's unlikely that it gets presented to the planning department as having a lifespan, and so we can't answer that question, unfortunately. 60 years is a reasonable guess, I would suggest, although I think that was probably what the government thought when the buildings were built in the 70s, and they obviously have less lifespan than that now due to the concrete. But modern technologies mean that buildings can be designed to be sustainable, and of course sustainable development is life that is a development that will last longer, essentially, for future needs. The second question was about consideration to additional school places. It hasn't been put to us that that's what's on the table as to whether the site should accommodate additional pupils. Or if it did accommodate additional pupils, then the application or the applicant could apply for an extension to the school again, and we would consider that at that particular time. But in some ways, we haven't considered the additional capacity as a planning issue as part of this application.
The understanding from the documentation is that the current school has more students than was designed for, and the new one will provide the same number of spaces as existing. It's just that there's a lot more space needed for the non-ambulance and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Neil, for a very comprehensive presentation. I've actually been in a situation where I taught in a demountable while they knocked a school down and rebuilt a new one. And reading through the reports, it looked like the demountables were going to be, or the temporary classrooms were going to be on where they're going to, the playing fields, and I think the mugger. Now, as I say, having been in this situation, when we then got back into, in my situation, when we got back into the school and there was a condition to reinstate the playing field into, you know, a usable state, all I can say is we used to keep tripping up when playing rounders, because it was never replaced in the state it needed to be in for children to use. So I went through the conditions and I couldn't find a condition that actually stated about you know, replacing the field. And is there any guarantee that that can be insisted upon?
Is that something that can be added as a belt and braces? We have a landscape plan included in this, but that's a good point about restoring.
I think it would have to be sort of specific wording for reinstatement, because there's the there is a plan that indicates the landscaping scheme. I don't know if yeah, that's probably the best one. Where it indicates number 30, that's what's shown on the slide, and so that's the development where you see number 30 on the bottom here. That's where the sort of temporary school would go. But the condition would need to sort of stipulate that it would be restored upon completion. There is a condition number 10, which may be sufficient. Within 24 months of the commencement of the development, temporary accommodation, including classrooms, offices, hall and kitchen dining accommodation as shown within those plans, shall be removed from the site in their entirety, and the land restored, reinstated to a playing field.
Yeah, it's reinstated, and it needs to be completely restored, because having had practical experience, I do know what builders, how they leave a playing field.
So that could be an amendment to the existing condition in that case.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that the sporting activity there in the grounds going to be shared by members of the public. What sort of hold you got, or have the public got on that? Because it has been known in the area where it starts off, that sort of agreement, and then it fades, and it's a sad affair when you get sports clubs getting organised and getting moved, and then suddenly they lose the facility. Thank you.
There's a planning condition which requires a community use agreement, and that includes the details of how the facilities will be operated, how they'll be managed, how the community members of the community will be able to come and go from the site, the hours of operation, and that is a detail that we would have control over in terms of the planning condition submission. So condition number 9 is the relevant one, and that relates to sort of the sports equipment, making sure they're also designed to to the right standards as well, in consultation with Sport England.
And just and just coming in on that, following up from what Neil said, it's obviously a legal agreement as well, so it's a formal document, community use agreement.
Councillor Marlowe.
Yeah, I just want to follow on from Councillor Carter's question, and I suspect I'm not going to. This is probably not in the remit of this committee, but we've obviously had and it's difficult not to be wowed by this at all. But we have a history of the horror story of Grenfell and the cladding scandal. We've got RAC just erupted over the past year or so, and we've got a school that's about to be demolished in Harlow that's only 4 years old. Can we be confident that the construction methods are going to be top class? Because this is going to be for a group that is extremely vulnerable. And I'd like to think that we're going to give this some consideration, or that this has been given some consideration. And we're going to see something that we're going to be proud of for those 60 years. Thank you.
Neil's already said that we can't consider the lifetime of a building, but at the same time, we understand that the operation is going to be net zero, carbon net zero, but we don't have that kind of information about the construction. I don't know whether there's anything that can be done by means of an informative or something like that.
Sometimes you get, well, there was an application. This application was submitted with a fire safety strategy, essentially, and that considered the importance of making sure that the buildings were designed to withstand the event of a fire, and so it's met that requirement of the planning stage. But most of the legislation in the actual fabric of the materials, the building itself, is covered through building regulations, and completely understand the concern. And planning guidance is getting a lot more sophisticated in this area as well, but we don't have the current policies as a planning authority to require any other form of restriction at the moment.
Councillor Stowe.
Yes, thank you. I guess you did mention rain screen, and rain screen is actually a clay-made product, which is not flammable. Which think about the cladding side. But my main point I wanted to clarify was on condition 10. You brought it to my mind. You talk about 24 months from the start of the contract, which presumably is the day they start the demolition. Are we aware of what the sort of reasonable contract period is to build the school? Because that's quite important to when the buildings come down.
It's not something that we can control as a planning authority, unfortunately. I mean, that's a question for the developers and the contractors that are procured through that process. Is not something that the local planning authority has a duty or a ability to control, unfortunately.
The point I make is that if you've got 24 months in the condition, it must have been discussed with the client, and if not, what happens? They overrun their contract.
They've accepted the wording of the condition, and if they do get into difficulty with that, they can apply to vary the condition to increase that period if they have to. And that's something that we consider at that time.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually relates to Highways' response to this. I'm the ward councillor for this area, and one of the biggest feedbacks I get is excessive speed of cars in Hoe Lane. And there's no traffic calming measures in Hoe Lane. The road surface is terrible. Parts of it are dark. It's difficult to negotiate, and there's 3 schools located on it. It doesn't seem very safe. It doesn't feel safe. And I've seen cars going along there myself at about 50, 60 miles an hour. So can we go back to Highways and ask them to reassess that in the light of the fact that there are 3 schools there?
The report seemed to suggest that Highways simply had no objection, but was there any more that they advised on the surrounding network?
what we have to consider is the additional traffic that the development creates, and then to understand whether that itself results in a significant impact in MPPF terms or a severe impact in MPPF terms. And in this instance, as the school is by and large staying within its capacity, it is not anticipated there will be a material increase in trips as a result of the development, and any additional trips that come from the community use are likely to be very minimal. The Highways advice is that there isn't justified, that the impact of this development requires that additional mitigation through this scheme on its merits, and so that wouldn't meet the condition tests or the planning obligation tests in order to secure further mitigation.
Just for clarity, during the building phase, will there be a ban on construction traffic going at access times to schools, so they're not clashing with the school drop-off?
There'll be construction management conditions, which would include some of that detail. And so we have the ability to control or seek to impose controls on construction movements.
Thank you.
Councillor Connolly.
Thank you, Chair. I note that there's the 3 houses that are part of the school's assets look like they're built around the same time as the school that's about to be demolished. And I wonder if there's been any consideration to upgrade those to be more sustainable, maybe insulation, maybe share the heating system from the school.
That isn't proposals. That isn't proposed as part of this planning application, unfortunately, and so that isn't something that we can insist in securing as a result of granting permission for a replacement school. So that's something that maybe the school have heard today and they can consider outside of this process.
Councillor Dunlop.
Thanks for the presentation. All looks very good at the minute. I just wondered what consideration has been given in the design of the temporary accommodation. Obviously, the people here are very vulnerable and don't really like change too much. And I'm sure as much effort needs to go into the temporary accommodation as is going into the permanent. So that was one question I have. Just how has that been considered and under what guidance? My other question or observation, perhaps rather than a question, is that to me there looks like an awful lot of hard standing land there, and the traffic looks like it's well managed. But there's plenty of other hard space which could be soft. Given that the people who are there are SEND, green space and trees and so on is a real method of calming and provides a much more comfortable environment for them. Is there opportunity to expand that, or is that design fixed now? Because the central space, I can't see the number, is it 21 or 31 in the very middle? That one there looks like an awful lot of space there, and you've got the sensory gardens running up the side. Would there be no opportunity to try and expand that in some way? And how do you get access to the other woods, which are great calming areas? Will those be integrated as part of the educational space?
To answer that sort of second question first, the playground's been designed to have, I think, key stage 3 and 4, and so it looks slightly larger because it's facilitating for both sort of key stages, and so the larger courtyard represents the sort of heart of the scheme, and so that's been designed, one has to assume, to the relevant Department of Education standard, and so we don't have any planning guidance that dictates what that size of that space should be, and so there isn't a recourse for going back and looking at that again. In terms of the landscaping proposals that are on the site, there is additional landscaping proposed than what's on the current site, and so we've reviewed it with the landscape officer, and he considers the additional landscaping proposed integrates well with the current landscaping, and it integrates well with the wider landscape plan itself. And so it's put on the table as a sort of an application that you're determining, and we feel that it meets the current planning requirements and it meets the district plan requirements in terms of improvement to landscaping on site. In terms of the access to the woods, that would probably be would be the similar arrangements that you have at the moment, and so that I'm assuming that doesn't change to a significant degree. There was one other question that you
It was the temporary accommodation.
Well, I mean, I know about this because my own children are in temporary school building, and as part of the process of designing that, I believe the school itself was part of that selection process, and they undertake that process themselves rather than in consultation with the local planning authority. And so we, as a planning authority, haven't had a big input into what's required on a temporary basis, because the Department of Education would have their own minimum standards of facilities that they need. Obviously, it needs to have a kitchen, needs to have dining hall and an internal area for assembly and the like, and also has to be designed with classrooms that provide sufficient capacity for storage for teachers, staff facilities, and the pupils themselves. And so there isn't, again, there is an absence of planning guidance on what a temporary facility should be in planning terms, and so the reliance would be on the Department of Education guidance that they operate under, and that's what we would assume to be the sort of main planning issue. And we would look at it from a point of view as the scale of the development, and we would look at it on the impact that it had in terms of the siting of the building. We would look at it in terms of the access issues, how it would be arrived at by foot, by cycle, and by vehicle. And we would look at, let's say, the boundary treatments as well, and would the space accommodate the needs of pupils at that time. And if we could be satisfied that that's the case, which we are in this instance, then there wouldn't be any further recourse for further change at the moment.
Could we have a condition or something that makes sure that they are demountable and reusable with minimum waste? Is there anything like that which we could, because it falls into our general concern with sustainable development and resource efficiency?
It would, in my view, it wouldn't be sufficient to justify refusing the planning permission. So I understand why it would be asked and what, the right intentions, but I don't think it's something that would meet the planning tests in terms of its necessity to grant planning permission for this development.
Councillor Copley.
Hi, thanks for the very good presentation. Just to start with, that was really helpful. I think before I start, I think this sounds like an amazing development, and I think it's really important that we do support like SEND schools, etc., as well as we're doing with other mainstream schools. I just wanted to ask, has there been any consideration to the kind of approach to construction and trying to minimise the impact of that on the existing 3 houses on the site, and more importantly on the children as well, in terms of, say, hours of work and things like that, so the disruption is kept to a minimum? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Condition number 33 requires a construction environmental management plan, and that covers sort of the biodiversity side of things, but it also looks at what construction activities look at from a biodiversity perspective. So it does part of what you're asking, but I think the other condition that we would look at would 25, which is the construction activities and working hours, and that sets them to 8 and 1 o'clock Monday to Friday and Saturdays. 8 till 6 on Monday to Friday and 8 till 1 on Saturdays, and not on Sundays or bank holidays. And that's just the hours.
Can I just go back to landscape? One of the things that is implied by the landscape is the amount of the management of water runoff. It sounds as if drainage is all right, and there are lots of conditions relating to water and drainage. So is that part of the landscape approach?
Yes, it meets all of the relevant policy and guidance on water runoff, and sustainable drainage systems, urban drainage systems.
Councillor Hill.
Hi, I have a question on the safety aspects of the school. It's also going from a single story to a double story, and there's going to be a considerable number of pupils with Mobility Act. What's the plan to evacuate them in the case of an emergency? Because a lot of them may need emergency chairs to go downstairs because you can't use lifts. Will there be enough trained staff to use them?
That is covered under different legislation. We don't have any planning guidance on evacuation as such.
My point is, I'm an emergency response team worker at my site. So if you've got mobility issues, you need to have a designated plan to get out the building for anyone with mobility issues. And also, if you've got a high proportion of people and you need a designated people trained to take them out.
I think what we can see from the application is the implementation of all sorts of standards and facilities and access. A lot of this is designed specifically for disabled students, with wider corridors and spaces designed accordingly, and security. So I think we can probably assume that those standards and design guides allow for that, because that's going to be a very central consideration. But it's not something that we can do.
No, okay.
Yeah, I understand there was some question about in the requirements, correct me, I can't remember which requirement it was, about secure by design. Was there going to be something on that that might be?
The secure by design is more to do with not necessarily building safety, it's safety of individuals approaching a site, and so it's something that the police would have an input on, and in this case we have put a planning condition on that requires the applicant to demonstrate sort of how they've sought to incorporate measures to meet the secure by design standards, and they submit that as part of the discharge of a condition. It's not possible to know at this planning stage what those specific measures will be, and so it is a matter that we think is justified as a planning condition.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. I noticed you had the asbestos report, and obviously it showed which areas it was in and where it had to be removed. I'm really just asking, is that going to be removed during sort of longer school holidays so that the children aren't on site while that is being removed?
I think that's a question that, again, we can answer in planning, in the planning realm.
The key. Oh, Councillor Stowe.
Sorry, I caught you in midstream there, really. I was going to propose that we accept the application as described with an additional to the condition 10. That's what I was going to do, but you were trying to say something and I'm not sure.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that we've rehearsed this well. We've acknowledged that this is in the Green Belt, and there are very special circumstances which we understand about the nature of the school and the reason for its increase, and this being there not being alternative sites and so on. So, in the light of that, can I accept your proposal if we go to the recommendation, which is, and seconded by Councillor Watson? So the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out and with the amendment that Councillor Stowe referred to. Can I see those in favour? So that's everybody, that's carried, and planning permission is granted. So thank you very much. And I think if we could, so informally, we have the applicant's representative here. We have talked about our interest in the excellence and the longevity of the buildings. That's something for those to think about. And we've also heard thoughts about the nature of the temporary accommodation and ensuring that that is as sustainable as possible. So thank you, members. If we go on to item 6, these are items for noting. First of all, we have a list of appeals decided. Are there any questions or comments on these? And are there any that you want to mention at all? No. It does demonstrate what officers have to do, and the results are quite good. And so the next one is new appeals. Are there any questions about any of these? So that's also noted. We have appeal and hearing. We have inquiry and hearing dates. These are time consuming. They involve a lot of work for officers, so we acknowledge that. And then finally, we have the performance figures, and we can see that consistently the planning officers, the staff are well achieving the targets, exceeding the targets. So, Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very confused by that agenda item 6D because it refers to 2022 numbers in the second bar down. It's all 2022. Is that just a typing error?
Yeah, my agenda's just disappeared, but it probably is a typing error, and I'll check that back with the officers and I'll confirm if there is an issue with that.
Yes, it appears to be columns, and it says October 23 at the top, and it says 23 at the bottom, but in the middle it says 22. So, so thank you. So Councillor Watson.
Can I just to point quick, what's the major and minor?
Minor application, there's a difference between the type of applications. So minor applications or your householder applications, and other applications, your majors are for 10 dwellings or more, and there's different timescales associated. So.
Yeah, I get the context now.
We take those items as noted. Thank you very much. And item 7 is any urgent business. So I'd like to thank you and call the meeting to a close at 8:06. Thank you very much.